Hi, today's video is the first in a new series of videos I'm going to be making, and it's going to explain how to clean the room control or selector control switches on your NuTone Master Station. Almost every NuTone Master Station made has some sort of grouping of switches that allow you to adjust how the individual remote room stations work on your system. In this particular example, this is a NuTone Model 2090, and this is going to be the subject of the first video today. And then there'll be more videos to show other models as we move along. These are the switches that I'm talking about, and in different models in different time periods, NuTone has different names for them. I typically like to call them room selector switches or room control switches because that is a good accurate description of what they do. They allow you to control the functions room by room in your house and set up how each individual station will operate. On a NuTone Model 2090, the choices are when the switch is set to the lower position, that room has both radio and intercom. If we slide it up one, we're turning it to the off position, which turns off the intercom and the music in that room. And then the top position is what they used to call listen or listen in, and later became the monitor position. So in these videos, we're going to cover different models in the same video because many of the designs share similar design aspects. It's not really necessary to make an individual video for each different model. So in today's video, we'll be covering the models 2090 and 2540. It would also apply to the 2542, which is a fairly rare model. So in a 2090, to gain access to these switches, and this isn't true for all models, but it is true for these particular models, you do have to remove the master station to gain access to the switches. I do have a video that shows how to remove a 2090 master or a 2540 master, so you can view those, and I'll try to remember to put links to those down in this video's description. You would simply remove the two screws, one on each side, and the master station will come away from the wall. I have this sort of propped up here. The easiest way to gain access to the room control switches is by removing the master station. You would remove the two screws, one on each side, and then lift the master station away and put it off to the side. And what you would have left is the switch box assembly. This is mounted permanently to the wall housing, which is mounted inside the wall of your house. And these are the switches that we're interested in cleaning. So let me go ahead and show you what these are about and the proper way to go ahead and clean those. And as I said, we're covering two models today, or perhaps it's really three. This is the switch box assembly out of a NuTone Model 2090, and this is a switch box assembly out of a NuTone Model 2540. This would be the same design that would be used in the 2542. The primary differences are the 2090 is a 3-wire system, so you have three conductor ribbon cable, and it's connected directly to the back of the switchboard assembly. The 2540 and 2542 is a 6-wire system, so it has 6 conductor NuTone cable, and it has a larger terminal board that would be mounted in the wall housing a lot like this. The other difference, if you look carefully, is the 2090 has 2 rows of 4 for a total of 8 switches, where the 2540 and 2542 has 2 rows of 5 with 10 switches. And that's primarily the difference. That's why I'm doing these as one video, because fundamentally they're the same. There's just 2 extra switches to clean. The style of switches that are used are identical. The stems might be a different color than yours. It depends on the color of your master station and when it was made to some degree, but the idea of how you clean them is the same. So let's go ahead and we're going to use the 2090 box as the example today, but everything I show you will apply to the 2540 and 2542 also. So for today's video, I brought two 2090 switch boxes from the shop. The reason I brought both of them was to give you some idea of the wide range of condition that we see when these come in with people's master stations, or the wide range of conditions you might see in yours. This one actually is fairly nice. There's not a lot of surface oxidation or dirt on it. The switches seem to be relatively clean looking anyway, and when I slide them, they actually move fairly freely. This one is actually much worse. You can see all the buildup that's on the switches, and if I take the screwdriver I can scrape it away. This is household dirt and oils and perhaps cigarette smoke and other things that have built up. And if the outside of the switches look like this, you know what's inside is going to be equally as dirty compared to this one, which looks pretty good, and the contacts inside are probably pretty clean. Now you might be wondering, why is it important that these switches work properly? It's because all of the audio for your 2090 or 2540 system goes through these switches, and if the contacts in the switches are oxidized and they don't make a good connection, then you're going to have intermittent operation on that particular station. One of the things that's difficult to convey in a video is what should the switches feel like when you move them. And I've been in customers' houses where the switches are almost literally frozen in place. It takes all the effort you can muster to push them up and move them out of the position they've been in for 40 years. Another consideration on these type of switches is these have a fairly long stem. The stem portion of the switch protrudes out from the switch body, which is more back in here quite a bit. So when they become hard to slide, instead of just sliding up and down easily, as you push them, they do more of this rocking motion. For instance, if you pushed it up, you've got to push it and push it and push it, and it rocks the stem up and up and up and up until finally it gives loose and it slides. And the problem with the rocking motion is, back inside the body of the switch, the contacts that are connected to the stem portion, they're being twisted up like this, and it's putting stress on it, and over years and years like this. And with years and years and years of that, the contacts on the sliding part of the switch lose their connection. They don't sit against the contacts tightly like you would want them to. And sometimes you can take these switches and wiggle them around. These wiggle a fair amount. And that one's the actual switch, which we're going to talk about too. These, actually, the switches are moving quite a bit. You might be able to see the body of the switch move as I wiggle the stem, whereas this one, it does it some, but I don't think it's not quite as much. This one, even though it may look better, may actually have bigger problems than this one does. The purpose of today's video is to show you how to clean these and how to make sure that they work as well as they possibly can, because finding replacements for these is next to impossible nowadays. I only even have maybe 3 or 4 sets of these, and that's not very many. If someone's looking for one, it can be a problem, and it's not an easy thing to replace. So let me go ahead and show you. We're going to do this one first, and I'm going to show you the simple way to clean, and then the cleaning that's more elaborate, and we're also going to look into why are these wiggling like this. Okay, so the first step of cleaning, like any cleaning we do, we're going to take our cloth or our rag and we're going to put it underneath what we're going to be cleaning, because I don't want overspray all over the workbench. And then these switches are a little tricky to clean, but not terribly difficult. Of course, we're going to use our Deoxit D5, which is our cleaner of choice. You should not use any kind of strictly solvent-based cleaner. You should not use carburetor cleaner. You should definitely not use WD-40, because that's not going to help anything. You need to have the right kind of cleaner. These little slide switches, what you're looking for, and again, this is hard to describe, but you're looking for a nice, clean, even slide as you push up on them. And they have what are called detents, which are, as it moves from position to position, it sort of locks itself in. So if we go from here to here, it's to the center position, it snaps into place. And then as we go up to the top position, you slide it and it snaps into that place also. So you want a nice clean slide. You want to feel it snap into place. And you should only have to push it with a reasonable amount of effort. If you have to push it so hard that the end of your thumb is turning white, that's too hard. Also, you don't want to, you need to be aware of, if when you wiggle the stem of the switch, if you hear that station cut in and out, or you have a station that doesn't play all the time regularly, but if you push the switch and hold it and wiggle it around carefully until you find that spot where the speaker plays, but as soon as you let go of it, the speaker stops, that switch is really very worn out. So on moderately dirty switches, you can get away with leaving this as an assembly and clean the switches in place, but on more dirty ones, I'm going to show you how to disassemble this carefully. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our deoxit D5, and we have the nozzle set on the low spray pressure, and what we're looking for is, if with all the switches in the bottom positions, right up here you can see here's the white stem and here's the white body of the switch, which extends up into here, and right up in here there's a little slot, and it's the space between the outside metal body of the switch and the white plastic slide, and that's where we're going to spray our cleaner. So we're going to put our nozzle pointed up into there, and we're going to spray just a little bit, and it's going to run down, and what we're looking for is to get it down inside the switch, and then we're going to slide it back and forth. And then you might want to do it again. And then you slide it up and down again. And the sliding up and down does a couple different things. When you spray the deoxit D5 in there, it gets onto the contact surfaces of the switch, and it helps remove the oxidation that's on it. And then sliding the switch helps physically remove more of the oxidation, and that's what improves the contact. So this one feels pretty good. So let's compare it to this one. So this one, when I slide it, the only way I can really describe it is it has somewhat of a gummy feel to it. This one, when you slide it, it feels sharp and crisp, and it slides cleanly. This one, when I slide it up and down, it feels gummy, or like it's sticky inside. So it's not really it's snapping into place, but it just doesn't feel as clean. So now I'll go ahead and clean this one and slide it up and down, and then I'll do it again, and now I'll try it in comparison to this one. And to me it feels like the gumminess or the stickiness is gone. So we'll go over to this one, and again, this has more of that gummy, sticky feeling. So the cleaner is obviously getting down inside the switch, and it's doing some good. So let me show you how you would disassemble this unit carefully, and I also want to look at why it seems like these switches are wiggling a whole lot. It could be a problem, or it could just be the nature of this design. So we're looking at the back of the switch box assembly, and you can see, and I'm going to leave all the wires on here, because this is sort of what you would be dealing with if you try this on your system. You're going to have all these wires connected to it, and it's not necessarily necessary to remove all the wires if you do this carefully. Inside the metal box, you have the circuit board assembly, and you have all the screws that the wires are connected to. On this side, you have the multi-pin connector that pokes through the side of the box, and then the switches protrude out through the front. So the first thing to do is you have to remove this from the metal box, because it won't allow you to lift the board out without taking it out. And the way you do that is there's a plastic tab here and another plastic tab here and here. There are 3, of course, because 3 makes it more difficult. So what you do is you take a small flat screwdriver and you push the tab in, and this is a little hard to do, especially when you're on the wrong side of it. But you have to push the tab in so you can slide it back through the box. Like that. And see, that one slipped past the edge of the cutout in the metal, so now I can tip it down. So if you hold that one down, then I can do this one. And of course that's going to be the hard one, it seems. So maybe we'll try this one over here instead. Alright, so there's 2, and now maybe number 3 will be more compliant. Like that. Oh, and just to point out, you can see here the round cutout in the metal, and here's this little heel-shaped piece right here, and there's a corresponding part of the plug connector right here that fits through it. That's how you index it to make sure it's in the right position. So we release the tab so this comes out, which is fine. Now we're going to take the switchboard assembly out of the metal box. And the way it's held in place is around the outside edge of the box are these metal tabs that are just slightly bent over to hold the board in place. So all you have to do is take your screwdriver and carefully bend these out a little bit. There's one there. There's 2 on the bottom. There's 1 on the other side and 2 on the top. So you just bend those up a little bit to give yourself enough clearance so the switchboard can be lifted out of the metal box. And here we have the actual switchboard itself. You can see there are some wires here, and those go around the edge of the board and are connected to the multi-pin plug here, and that's the whole thing. If you remove the switch from the box, one of the advantages is you can actually see the tops of the switches here, 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 and here. Instead of spraying up through the little crack in the sliding portion, you can actually spray down inside the switch. So here you can see in the close-up, here are the tops of the inner parts of the switch. That's the white plastic part here. This is the back portion of the white stem here. And on the back of this are the contacts that slide and connect to the contacts on the back of the fixed part of the switch. So if I slide these down, you'll see this part disappear. So that's the actual switch itself moving up and down. And again, if you take the board out, that gives you a better opportunity to clean it because you can spray right inside the body of the switch right here instead of spraying up and down into the switch, and then you can slide it back and forth to clean it off. And it's not always necessary to take this apart, and if you do this, you have to do it understanding that if you break it, you're probably out of luck. And the rule is when you work on anything that's as old as something like this, you know, let's say this was made in 1972 and that makes it 44 years old, you proceed with caution. You be conservative in what you do and you be careful in what you do. The point here is to make it better, not to make it worse. And if you break it, then you're going to definitely make it worse. So once you've cleaned the switches so they slide well, as those feel like they do now, you'll be in much better shape. Now, one of the other things I wanted to look at is I was curious as to why it seemed like they wiggle a lot. Like you can see this wiggles. And they all kind of do that. And one of the things I've found on early switchboards like this is these switches as an assembly are soldered to the board on the back side. And on this particular one, this is row number 8, this point, these 2 points, and this point here, these are the actual connections from the very back part of the switch, and they come through holes in the circuit board, and then they're soldered in place. I have seen on some of these sometimes that the solder connections where the tabs come through the holes, the solder will actually be cracked. And the reason it gets cracked is, I think, because the switches become so hard to slide because they're so incredibly dirty that there's a lot of additional stress that's put on the switch as a whole. And as you force the switch up, you're pushing really, really hard to get it to slide, it puts a lot of stress on the solder connections, and over time they crack. And if they were cracked, when you wiggle the switch, you would be able to see these tabs move around, and that's not really the case in this particular one. These seem to be soldered correctly, so that's not really a problem. And the other thing I notice is, if you look at all 4 of these, they all wiggle about the same amount. And what I can see when I'm wiggling it and looking at the switch itself is, it's not wiggling the very back part of the switch where it's soldered through the board, but it's the actual switch itself that's wiggling on the connections that are on the fixed part of the switch. So it probably wasn't like that as much when they were brand new, but they're like that now because they're old. And as long as they make a reasonably good connection, it's not that big of a deal. If you had one switch which was very, very bad, sometimes what you can do is, since you have 8 positions and your system may only have 5 or 6 speakers, you might have a couple positions that have never been used. And if that's the case, you can simply move the wires on the back of the board to the unused position, because those switches would be in relatively good condition. One final step that you can do on the switches, if you're inclined to, and you don't necessarily have to do this, but sometimes it improves the contacts and the movement of the switch quite a bit, is you can add what's called a dielectric jelly or a dielectric grease to the switch. And what I use is this is another Deoxit product. This is Deoxit, it's called Fader Grease, so it's model DFG213. This happens to be, I think this is like a pint size container of it. They do make it in smaller quantities because this will last me here at the shop, and we use this every day. This will probably last me 2 years, and you don't need that much, and it's kind of expensive. So they make it in small little squeeze tubes that you can get. What we do here at the shop is I buy it in larger quantities, and then I have these little plastic syringes, and we fill them up so we can inject the fader grease into whatever it is we want to inject it into. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit inside the switch, and then I'm going to move it back and forth, and that's going to help lubricate the switch and protect the contacts so that they don't oxidize as quickly, and it usually will improve the way the switch functions. So this will be a little bit hard to see, but you can see now right here. So let me move this up. So we're looking at the top, the back part of the stem assembly that we looked at in the earlier part of the video, and you can see right here there's this sort of half moon cutout in the plastic piece, and that's the part that slides over the connections that are in the fixed part of the switch down here. Let's see, right in there. And that's where we're going to inject the fader grease. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our little syringe full of fader lube, and we're going to squirt a little bit down in there. It doesn't take a lot. And then we're going to move the switch to help distribute it. And then we're going to inject a little more And like I said, this is not something that everybody's going to do. You got to be hardcore to do this. This is one of those kind of things that we do on people's equipment when it comes in for it to be rebuilt, because we want to send things back in good condition. And then to really get it right, we're going to turn it over, because the thing to consider is the length of the switch. This is about probably a little less than 1 inch long, and you can only squirt the fader lube in so far, and then you get too much resistance and it piles up on the surface of where you're squirting it in. So if you go on both sides, you have a better likelihood of distributing it throughout the entire switch. And of course then moving it back and forth helps a lot also. And that's actually feeling pretty good. And this is one of those types of projects that you work at and you have to assess as you go how effective you think it's being. Because since you have it disassembled, you can't do a practical test by trying it out with the master station before. You have to do it, you won't know till the end when you put it all back together. So that one feels pretty good. And the best way I can describe it, these were cleaned, at least these two for sure. This one, it has the snappy feel that we were looking for. But this one, this has more of what I would call a dampened feel. It's not the sticky or gummy that we started with, but it has more of a dampened feel. It's like you can feel it slide easier. It's less, maybe you can hear it. It has a smoother, better feel to it when you put the grease in it than without. And that's kind of what we were looking for. I'm pretty sure that when these type of switches were made new by whatever company made them for NuTone, this is probably what they felt like when they were new, or pretty close to this. And I'm sure they put something in there to help lubricate the movement so there would be less wear and tear. And that's one of the reasons that we do it, because it seems to improve things quite a bit. The last thing I'll say about this, for those of you who are very handy and think that there's other ways to do this, which perhaps there are, but this is the way I've learned to do it, is one of the things that you should never, ever, ever, ever do is remove the switches from the board by desoldering them, so you could pluck it off the board, and then unbend the little tabs that hold the switch together so you can get inside of it and give it a really deep cleaning, because all you're going to do is you're going to ruin the switch. And again, we're back to this is an irreplaceable item for the most part. You'll never find a switch that's exactly like this. Maybe the footprint will be the right size, but it'll be too large or too small, or the stem won't stick out the right amount, or it'll stick out too far, or it'll be the wrong color. So trust me, we've looked for all these kind of things. It's not easy to do. But the problem with disassembling the switch is when you unbend the little tabs to take it apart, they'll break off. Either they break off when you unbend them, or they break off when you bend them back again. These were not designed to be disassembled and serviced and then put back together and put back into use. These are not excuse me, these are not NASA quality switches. These are simple slide switches from back in the day, and again, everything you want to do, you want to be conservative with. So that's sort of the ins and outs of cleaning the controls on your NuTone 2090 or 2540 or 2542. I hope if you have problems with your switches, you'll give this a try, and it should help out. I think the fader grease is definitely a good way to go. And I'll put down in the video description, I'll put a link in to where you can find the Deoxit D5 and the fader lube, and you can clean your switches and see if that helps your system. That's all for today. I hope you found this interesting and helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube. Thumbs up. And if you like our videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribing raises our search rankings on YouTube, so more people will find our video. This video and our YouTube channel are ad-free and always will be, so subscribing helps us a lot. That's all for today. See you on the next video. Oh, wait, sorry. Forgot. One last step. We have to put it back together. We didn't put it back together. All right. Sorry about that. So, we have to put the switchboard back in the box. See, I got all excited doing the fader grease and I forgot. Alright, so you have to make sure you get it in the box in the right way, and that's easy because the plug has to go through the hole in the metal box. So you sit this back down in there, and then you hold it against the metal box with your finger, and you go back around very carefully, and you bend the metal tabs, and I think a larger screwdriver would be better. And you don't have to bend these down all the way. If you looked at them before you took them out, you'll see that they're only bent over about halfway or maybe a little less. Because we're not, as my friend used to say, we're not building a bridge, we're just fixing an intercom. So you don't have to be extreme about it. You just bend them over a little bit like this. And I would simply bend back over the ones that were originally bent. There seems to be ones that aren't bent over, and I guess it wasn't necessary, so let's just assume that NuTone knows more about it than I do. So once you get it bent back into place, then you take the plug, you line up the index here with the cutout in the circle, like that. And you simply push it back through from the back, and it pushes through the opening, and the tabs, remember the ones we had to fight to push them down so we could take it out, they pop back, they flare back out, and as they pop through the holes and hold it in place, you can always slip your screwdriver under them and bend them, make sure they're back all the way, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So, oh, that's the one we put the grease in, and that's the one that we didn't. So you can really tell the difference. Oh, I'm going to show you one more thing too, since we did oh, I forgot something. Okay, so the last bit of this, if this came into the shop, see, you thought this was going to be shorter, but it isn't. The last bit that we do when these come into the shop, we'll put this away and put this over here, is the little slotted knurled ends of the switch stems. These get really dirty. The switch stems get dirty from oils and things in your fingers, and they look kind of shabby sometimes. So the way we clean them is, I'll tilt this up. I use this. This is one of those multi-purpose orange base cleaning kind of things. I don't have a specific kind that I care that you use, but this is a water-based product, and it doesn't really have chemicals per se. It's all made from orange peels and things, so that's pretty good. Plus it smells like orange sherbet ice cream, which is kind of nice. So what I would do is spray a little bit of this on your rag. Doesn't take a lot. And then you can carefully wipe the switches. And on the white switches, it's kind of tough sometimes because the plastic gets stained, and you may not be able to get all the stain off of it. But usually on the flat portions of the stems, you can clean them off and they'll look much better. And also, a lot of this is hidden behind the 2090 faceplate, so you don't really see it. It's only the last quarter that really sticks through. But the part that makes them look particularly shabby is the ridged areas on the ends, because they collect the oils from your fingers and then dirt, and it sort of gets in there and it's hard to get it out. So here's how we clean that. We'll put our rag down here. We'll take the orange cleaner and a little brass bristle brush. Try saying that 3 times fast. And what we're going to do is we're going to bristle in the direction of the ridges. So we'll take the orange cleaner and we'll put just a little bit on it. We don't want to flood it and get the orange cleaner down inside the switches that we just cleaned. And then you just bristle brush it in the direction of the ridges. And then we'll put a little more and we'll wipe it off. And sometimes you've got to do them a couple times depending on how dirty they are. Sometimes there's some spots that are worse than others. The advantage of using the bristle brush is that the brass is very soft, so it won't damage the plastic. And because it's got a zillion little brass bristles, it fits into the ridges nicely. And it's strong enough that you can sort of brush away the grime that's built up in them. And then notice how I'm spraying it like down, so it's not running down the stem into the switch. Okay. Alright, so maybe you can see, but this one is clean and looks relatively, it's not really white, it's more ivory, I guess, but it looks much brighter and cleaner compared to these, which still have a lot of grime, especially that one and this one and that one. I guess they're all pretty bad. Anyway, it cleans them all, it cleans it up, takes the dirt and stuff out of the ridges, and just makes it look a lot nicer. And if you're going to do things, let's do things right. So now that one's cleaned up. I guess I should have done that one because that one has the grease. Anyway, those are just little added bonuses that you get to see for sticking around. Anyway, that's all for today. See you on the next video.